Have you ever sensed a strange unease when engaging with someone, as if something unseen but profoundly disturbing was lurking beneath the warmth of their smile? Carl Jung, one of the most insightful psychologists in history, uncovered a chilling pattern throughout his clinical experience. There is a quiet indicator that signals a threat far deeper than any visible aggression. This warning, often unnoticed by our conscious awareness but picked up by our primal instinct, doesn't emerge through hostility or obvious toxicity. It's subtler, and because of that, immeasurably more perilous. Ancient traditions had already cautioned us about such individuals, but Jung provided the scientific framework for what our ancestors only sensed. What's most unsettling? This signal can appear in those who seem completely ordinary or even charming, and once you sense it, the only wise reaction is immediate withdrawal. Shadow projection may be the most insidious psychological mechanism Jung ever revealed in human interaction. Picture this. You're speaking to someone who suddenly assigns you motives, thoughts, or traits you've never displayed or considered. They aren't reacting to you but to a warped image they've constructed in their psyche. Sound familiar? That sensation you feel is the raw projection of the Jungian shadow. The shadow embodies all that we disown within ourselves, traits we deem unacceptable and thus bury in the unconscious. But they don't vanish. They linger, hidden from conscious view, gaining energy deep within our inner world. When someone routinely projects this shadow onto others, they exhibit the most dangerous sign Jung identified: a total inability to acknowledge their disowned elements. They literally cannot detect these traits in themselves, so they see them only in others. The threat comes from the fact that, in their eyes, you genuinely embody those rejected parts. Spiritual systems across time have grasped this reality well before Jung formalized it. Buddhism describes the darkened mirror that reflects one's own flaws as if they belong to someone else. Christian texts speak of the plank in one's eye while spotting the speck in another's. The true danger lies in how certain the projector is of their perception. They are not faking it. They sincerely see in you what they've buried in themselves. This distorted view carries a conviction so strong that it often persuades outsiders. They can convince others that you are precisely as they claim. Modern neuroscience has confirmed Jung's insight. Our brains are wired to confirm what we already believe. But in large-scale shadow projection, this filter becomes a distortion machine. Scholar Robert Johnson likened this to wearing lenses that twist everything we observe. But how can you know when someone is projecting their shadow onto you? The giveaway appears when what they say about you clashes with what you know inside. They accuse you of intentions you've never had or feelings you've never felt. And the most frightening part? They're absolutely convinced, impervious to contradiction. So what's really happening? You're witnessing the outer conflict of an inner crisis. They're fighting parts of themselves they cannot face, and you've unwillingly become the war zone. The road to hell is paved with good intentions, goes the ancient saying, to which Jung might have added, and paved by those who believe they are unquestionably righteous. Ego inflation is among the gravest threats because it wears the mask of virtue. When someone is utterly sure of their moral superiority, spiritual purity, or grasp on absolute truth, you are observing what Jung called psychic inflation, arguably the most ominous sign of all. Unlike ordinary pride, which is easy to notice, Jungian inflation is profoundly more dangerous. It arises when the ego fuses with archetypal images, especially that of the savior, the seer, or the truth-bearer. They no longer see themselves as flawed individuals, but as a channel of divinity or universal law. German mystic Meister Eckhart cautioned against this centuries ago, naming it the subtlest trap on the spiritual journey. Zen calls it Zen sickness, while Sufism refers to the veil of light, far more hazardous than the veil of darkness, because it hides in what appears to be illumination. Have you ever noticed someone who never questions themselves, who speaks with such unwavering certainty you begin to doubt your own intuition? Jung observed this phenomenon with grave concern. Unlike true sages, who speak from a place of humility, aware of their own limits, those in the grip of psychic inflation radiate a dangerous conviction. They do not entertain doubt because, in their eyes, they are not voicing opinions. They are delivering truths, absolute, divine, unquestionable. And it is precisely this illusion of infallibility that becomes magnetic. The more uncertain the world, the more we crave anchors. And nothing appears more stable than someone who believes, without a shadow of doubt, that they are the anchor. Jung witnessed how deeply inflated individuals, merged with archetypes of the savior or the prophet, began to attract devoted followers. Their charisma didn't stem from charm. It came from certainty, from the illusion of moral purity, from the subtle proclamation, "I do not speak, truth speaks through me." Claudio Naranjo captured this spiritual trap in a single contrast. The ordinary ego says, "I am important." The inflated spiritual ego whispers, "I am the vessel of goodness itself." It is this whisper that deceives not only others, but the self. How can you detect this dangerous inflation? Observe how they react when confronted, corrected, or contradicted. A psychologically whole person considers disagreement as a mirror, sometimes painful, often enlightening. But the inflated individual perceives it as a sacrilege, a violation not against them, but against the cosmic order they believe they represent. For them, criticism is heresy, opposition is darkness, and questioning them becomes synonymous with questioning truth itself. This is not arrogance. This is archetypal possession. And Jung warned, the psyche cannot carry this burden for long. The ego is too small to house the infinite. When it tries, the tension becomes unbearable. And what follows is collapse. Because everything repressed in the name of perfection eventually returns, wild, chaotic, and unrecognizable. Even more disturbing is the individual who seems too perfect, too agreeable, too composed. Every word calculated, every gesture rehearsed, every smile correct. But something feels off. You can't explain it. You just feel it. An eerie absence of spontaneity, a suffocating symmetry in their persona. Jung called this the persona, a mask worn so long that the wearer forgets there's a face beneath it. It is the performance of humanity without the soul of it, and your instincts, older than your thoughts, detect the lie. In Zen, this false perfection is the polish that erodes the core. In Taoism, it's the danger of shaping the surface until the essence is lost. What seems elegant is, in truth, hollow. Neuroscience affirms what mystics always knew. Our brains possess mirror neurons that detect subtle incongruities, the tiny fractures between word and emotion, between smile and spirit. When there's a mismatch, you feel it as unease, that whisper in your gut. Something isn't right here. The real peril? The mask doesn't delete what it hides. It buries it. And what's buried grows in the dark. The more perfect the persona, the more monstrous the shadow waiting beneath it. Marie-Louise von France warned us. Behind the most socially adapted person often lies a storm. The more rigid the mask, the more violent the eruption when it finally breaks. And when it does, it's not only the self that suffers, it's everyone nearby. Jung called this betrayal, not of others, but of the self. And like all betrayals, it doesn't go unpunished. Now imagine, you're speaking with someone you've known for years, same eyes, same voice, but something ancient has stepped forward behind the veil of their personality, a cold intensity in the gaze, an unfamiliar energy, uncanny and vast, as if you are no longer speaking with a person, but with a force, something transpersonal, vast, and utterly indifferent to your soul. This disturbing phenomenon, recognized for millennia in traditional cultures, was defined by Jung as archetypal possession, perhaps the most alarming sign we can perceive in another human being. Archetypes, in Jung's view, are primordial forms within the collective psyche, timeless, transpersonal forces that shape our inner and outer experiences. Each archetype holds both light and shadow. When one seizes a person's consciousness, they no longer speak as an individual, but as a vessel for something far greater and far more dangerous than themselves. Shamanic traditions knew this intimately. As Mircea Eliade observed, shamans could discern between sacred channeling and dangerous possession, where the ego is entirely submerged. Christian mystics called it discernment of spirits, the vital ability to distinguish between elevated inspiration and destructive delusion. The warning emerges when someone loses psychological flexibility and becomes completely fused with a single archetypal identity. It may be the savior, the martyr, the warrior, the prophet, or the judge. The specific mask is irrelevant. What matters is the rigidity, the absence of doubt, the disappearance of human nuance. You sense it in their eyes, an unnatural intensity. In their voice, an unwavering monologue devoid of curiosity. In their presence, a monolithic certainty that feels larger than any person should be. As Robert Moore wrote, you are no longer speaking with a full human being, but with a fragment, an archetypal force that has hijacked the personality. Modern neuropsychology has confirmed states where the brain regions tied to personal identity quiet down, while transpersonal zones surge with activity. In ritual and sacred contexts, these states can be transformative. But when they erupt uncontained, they become psychologically explosive. What makes archetypal possession so perilous is its seductive clarity. The possessed radiate an eerie sense of mission. Ambiguity vanishes. Their voice, gestures, and presence pulse with a certainty that mesmerizes others. Jung observed how such individuals, political or spiritual, often become lightning rods for mass movements. Their conviction speaks to our deepest craving, certainty in a chaotic world. But this is the trap. Archetypes are not one-sided. The savior contains both mercy and messianic madness. The judge holds both discernment and tyranny. When someone fuses with an archetype, they will inevitably embody its shadow, even as they believe themselves pure. Jung documented cases of individuals possessed by archetypes who later acted in shocking contradiction to their conscious beliefs, only to rationalize or forget entirely. In such states, self-reflection collapses, the ego dissolves, and something ancient and impersonal takes over. But there is another sign, more subtle, more tragic. It is the pattern Jung called the compulsion to repeat, a haunting rhythm where a person unconsciously recreates the same emotional disasters again and again, as if caught in a mythic loop. This is not deliberate. It is not manipulative. It is fated, a psychological enactment of wounds too old to remember, too deep to escape. When you spot this pattern in another, someone who seems always to end up betrayed, abandoned, humiliated, attacked, rescued, it is a sign that you are witnessing something sacred and sorrowful, a soul reenacting its original wound. Psychoanalyst Christopher Bollas called these unthought knowns, formative shocks never properly digested, yet shaping every later experience like invisible gravity. Buddhism named it karma, not punishment, but momentum, a psyche drawn again to the known pain, because the known is safer than the unknown. In the Christian tradition, this was original sin, not moral failure, but unconscious inheritance. Patterns pass through generations, like whispers in the blood. The most unnerving moment comes when you realize, this person is not choosing this. They are astonished, confused, asking, why does this always happen to me? And yet it happens again and again. The same story, different faces, the same betrayal, under new names. Modern neuroscience now echoes this mystery. Early trauma wires the brain for repetition. Circuits carved in fear become paths of least resistance. Suffering becomes familiar, and the familiar, unconsciously, becomes home. But the gravest danger is this. Those caught in repetition compulsion often recruit others, unwittingly casting them in roles within their internal drama. The rescuer, the betrayer, the judge, the lost child. As psychoanalyst Donald Kalschit warned, these internal mythologies spill outward, ensnaring bystanders in a story not theirs. To recognize this is to step back, to refuse the role, to not become a character in someone else's unconscious script, and perhaps most importantly, to offer compassion without being consumed. As analyst Donald Kalschit once wrote, unprocessed trauma does not remain silent. It demands to be staged. Without knowing it, we are sometimes cast into a role in a psychic play that began long before we ever met the actor beside us. Jung noticed something uncanny. The deeper the unconscious wound, the more the external world begins to echo it. Coincidences multiply. Encounters repeat. Patterns loop. What the psyche cannot integrate it reenacts and calls it fate. In therapy, this pattern becomes painfully clear. The same story is told again and again. Different names, different faces, but the same betrayal, the same abandonment, the same wound, and always the same bewilderment. Why does this keep happening to me? Marie-Louise von France once whispered the key. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. There is something magnetic in this repetition, a gravitational pull of the soul. Those possessed by inner wounds unconsciously emit a signal. That signal calls forth others who can help them restage the trauma, not to heal it, but to relive it. Jung called this eerie dynamic negative synchronicity, the unconscious orchestrating our encounters, like a playwright determined to see the same tragedy unfold. And yet, the same psyche that holds our danger also holds our salvation. There is a path, a quiet, sacred one, that moves not away from the shadow, but through it. This is the way of integration. To integrate the shadow is not to become perfect. It is to become real. It is to kneel before your inner darkness and say, I see you, I know what you are, and I take responsibility. As Jung said, I would rather be whole than good. Wholeness is not sainthood. It is the alchemist's art, turning lead into gold, hatred into insight, rage into clarity. In Tibetan Buddhism, this is called turning poison into medicine. In Western alchemy, it is the sacred marriage, the union of opposites within the soul. Those who have begun this path radiate something rare, a fierce honesty about their own flaws, and a deep compassion for the flaws of others. They do not hide behind masks of purity, nor do they collapse into shame. They walk between the two, humble but awake. Contemporary neuroscience affirms what mystics always knew, that integration rewires the brain itself. New bridges form between the limbic shadows of emotion and the luminous halls of self-reflection in the prefrontal cortex. Awareness, quite literally, transforms the structure of the soul. And in that transformation, a miracle occurs. That which we own no longer owns us. That which we see no longer hides. What was once acted out blindly is now held with tenderness and used with intention. As Robert Johnson said, what we deny does not disappear. It emerges in forms over which we have less control. True integration does not scream its presence. It does not boast nor posture. It breathes. It sees. It listens. It recognizes that there are no pure villains, no spotless saints, only complex humans, each carrying a fragment of the collective mystery. Psychological maturity begins, as James Hollis said, when we abandon the fantasy of our absolute innocence. The whys are not without contradiction. They are woven from it. The Dalai Lama admits his anger. Teresa of Avila confessed her dryness. Rumi danced with his demons and made poetry of them. What they show us is simple, that inner authority arises not from perfection, but from integration. Not from controlling the image, but from standing humbly in the truth. It is a strange blend of quiet strength and soft humility, of presence that does not need to dominate, of wisdom that does not need to be right. As Zen master Shunryu Suzuki said, in the beginner's mind, there are many possibilities. In the expert's, there are few. So before we part, have you seen these signals in someone close to you? Or perhaps, have you caught a glimpse of them in yourself? If this touched something true within you, share your voice in the comments, for it is in speaking from the soul that transformation begins. Consciousness is the first gate, integration is the path, and the shadow once feared becomes the teacher. Subscribe, share, and walk the inner path with us.